The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows of the Miller household, casting a warm glow over the white tiles and the lingering scent of breakfast. Brian Miller, a young man currently navigating the complex social hierarchy of his sophomore year, was engaged in an activity that was quite uncharacteristic for a Saturday morning. He was carefully sliding clean plates into their designated spots in the cupboard, moving with a deliberate sense of purpose. His mother, Judy, entered the room and stopped in her tracks, her eyebrows arching in genuine surprise. She looked at her son, and then at the open dishwasher. Brian looked up, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He asked his mother what it looked like he was doing. Judy replied that it looked like he was emptying the dishwasher. Brian confirmed this, adding that he was doing it without even being asked. He pointed out that he did not want her to tell him that he never did anything around the house anymore. Judy, ever the practical mother, asked if he had actually run the dishwasher first. Brian paused, the realization hitting him as he admitted that no, he did not actually run the machine. Before the conversation could continue, the telephone rang. Lauren, Brian's younger sister, snatched the receiver from the wall. She greeted the caller and then turned to the room, announcing that Brian was indeed there. She asked the person on the other end who was calling. Her eyes widened as she heard the name Sarah Henley. Lauren let out a sarcastic laugh, telling the caller that it was real funny. She told the girl, whom she assumed was her friend Becca playing a prank, that if she wanted to pretend to be the homecoming queen, she had to sound a lot more stuck up. The voice on the other end clarified the situation, causing Lauren's face to flush with immediate embarrassment. She quickly apologized, explaining that she was Lauren, Brian's sister. She shouted for Brian, telling him the phone was for him. She whispered to her mother in disbelief, wondering why the homecoming queen would want to talk to Brian. She worriedly asked if Brian was helping Sarah design a dress, or something equally unexpected. Brian took the phone with a cool confidence that seemed new to him. He greeted Sarah and listened as she spoke. He mentioned that the party was tonight at the house of Andy Howard and promised it was going to be mad crazy. Judy, standing nearby, whispered a question, asking what mad crazy meant. Brian, covering the mouthpiece, explained that it was not quite twisted, but definitely better than jiggy. He finished the call, telling Sarah he would see her later. Judy was baffled. She asked her son how he had become friends with Sarah Henley. Brian simply stated that she was a sweet kid. He explained that they had become friends since he started hanging out with the varsity basketball team. Lauren chimed in with a sharp wit, asking if, by hanging, he meant his underwear was hanging from the flagpole with him inside them. Brian ignored the jab, explaining that he was the team statistician and the athletes liked having him around. When Brian mentioned the party again, Judy became concerned. She told him that it was no big deal, just some seniors having some people over. Bill, Brian's father, walked into the kitchen and caught the tail end of the conversation. He told Brian that what would be mad crazy was Brian not going to the party. Judy took a more measured approach. She told Brian that they were really happy he was making new friends, but she reminded him that he was only a sophomore. She asked if he was sure he was ready for a senior party. Brian asked why it mattered. Judy explained that it was an older crowd and they would be participating in older activities. Bill was more direct, clarifying that she meant smoking and boozing, which they could not condone. Brian promised his parents that he would never drink. He told them he had seen the ill effects of it. Bill chuckled, saying it was called teaching by example and that Brian was welcome for the lesson. Judy told Brian that this was a big decision and that she and Bill needed to discuss it before letting him go. Brian, showing a surprising amount of maturity, said he understood and left the room. Bill and Judy turned to each other. Bill noted that there were many concerns. Weighing the pros and cons, Judy expressed her worry, asking if he was really sure Brian was ready. Bill argued that they needed to let him experience these things now, so he did not go buck wild later. When Judy asked what that meant, Bill painted a vivid picture of Brian going to college, attending his first keg party, getting smashed, and waking up naked and handcuffed to a bike rack. Judy called the scenario crazy, but Bill insisted it could happen to a guy, even twice. Eventually, Judy agreed that if Bill thought he was ready, they would let him go. However, she suggested letting him sweat a little bit, so he would not think it was an easy decision. They called Brian back into the room. After a few moments of feigned tension, Bill broke the silence and told Brian he could go to the party. A few days later, the family was gathered in the living room. Bill was watching a basketball game on television, frustrated with the performance of the Chicago Bulls. He complained about their shooting percentage. Brian chimed in, noting that the team had only been shooting 30% from the floor in the last 3 games. He suggested that since Pippen had a sweet outside shot, they should put him in. Bill was stunned. He turned to Judy and said his son just said the name Pippen and was not talking about musical theater. He told Brian he had dreamed about this day. Brian explained that since he had been doing stats for the team, he had really gotten into the sport, seeing it as a combination of math and physics. Bill told him not to dork it up, reminding him it was just basketball. Lauren entered the room and told Brian she saw the car of Joaquin pulling up. Brian excitedly mentioned they were on day 4 of an online marathon of the game Risk. He wished himself and his 10 soldiers good luck. Lauren made a joke about his 10 fingers being his only date for the prom. Judy defended Brian, mentioning that at the party he went to, he spoke to a nice blonde girl from the swim team. Bill joked that for Brian, that probably just meant she was blonde, she could swim, and she was nice. In another part of town, Linda, a family friend, was dealing with her own romantic troubles. She complained to Judy about a terrible date with a man named Pete. She described him as needy and suffocating. Judy jokingly suggested inviting him in since they had pillows he could cling to. Later that evening, the telephone rang again. Bill answered it. A voice on the other end, sounding quite intoxicated, told Brian to come pick them up because the whole team had been out partying. Bill informed the caller that he was not Brian. The drunk athlete did not believe him, claiming he was not drunk either. He gave their location at a taco stand on the corner of Homestead and Noble. Bill told the boy he was not picking them up. The boy pleaded, saying Brian had promised and that he had accidentally vomited on his car keys, rendering his electronic remote useless. Bill told him his hang-up function still worked and ended the call. Bill told Judy that some drunk basketball players were asking Brian for a ride. Judy was concerned about them being stranded. They discussed the situation, worried that the boys might try to drive themselves home. Bill realized that if Judy showed up to pick them up, it would ruin Brian's reputation. He suggested that he would go instead. He decided to pretend to be Brian's cool cousin from California named Heather, but then corrected himself, saying he would just be a relative. When Bill arrived at the taco stand, the boys were confused. They asked if Brian had gotten old and puffy. Bill told them Brian could not make it and that he was Brian's cousin. He lied and said Brian's father lived in Hawaii, solving crimes with his old buddies from the military, wearing short shorts and having a sweet mustache. He said they called him Magnum P.I. The boys thought it sounded like a television show. As they drove, Bill heard the boys calling Brian by the nickname Jeeves. He asked why they called him that. One of the boys explained that Brian was their helper monkey and their butler. He did everything they told him to do, acting as a designated driver, going on burger runs, doing their homework, and even babysitting. Bill was disheartened to learn that his son was being used as an errand boy rather than being a true member of the team. The next day, the atmosphere at home was somber. Linda was still obsessing over Pete, especially after hearing that a woman named Susan from accounting wanted to go out with him. Judy tried to comfort Bill, who was upset about Brian. Bill told her he thought his son was cool, but it turned out he was just an errand boy. Judy offered him pot roast, but Bill said she could not just slap a pot roast on that kind of wound. When Brian came home from school, he was miserable. He told his parents the basketball team would not talk to him anymore, and they had kicked him out of practice. He blamed his cousin, whom Bill had pretended to be. Bill and Judy sat Brian down to tell him the truth. They explained that the players were not his real friends and only valued him for what he could do for them. Brian surprised them by saying he already knew they made fun of him. He said they made fun of everyone. He pointed out the perks of his position, like cutting in line at lunch and sitting at the cool table. But now, he said, the whole school was calling him a narc because Bill had intervened. Lauren confirmed this, saying even she had to call him a narc at school so people would not hate her too. The family went to the next basketball game to support Brian, but they were shocked to see he had been replaced as the statistician. Instead, Brian was dressed in the costume of the school mascot, Coogie the Cougar. Bill went down to the locker room to talk to the team. He apologized for getting them in trouble and explained he was just being overprotective. He tried to convince them to let Brian back on the team as a statistician. Bill suggested that Brian's van would be useful for a school prank against their rival, Hancock Magnet School. He mentioned a tradition of putting a dress on the statue of John Hancock. The boys liked the idea. However, the school coach overheard them. He scolded the boys and Mr. Miller for discussing pranks. He punished the team with extra exercises and told them that because of Mr. Miller's interference, Brian's nickname was now officially Suck. Later, the coach called Bill and Judy into his office. He was disappointed because someone had vandalized the Hancock sign, stealing the first 3 letters. He found the letters in Brian's locker. Brian was confused, but the team suddenly saw him as a hero. They thought he was a rebel who had pulled off a daring prank. They gave him a new nickname, Spider-Man. Back at home, Judy confessed to Bill that she was the one who had stolen the letters and planted them in Brian's locker to save his reputation. Bill was amazed. He called her a great mom and a wonderful wife, even if she was technically a criminal. The story ended with a bit of classic Miller family humor. Bill had tried on the cougar mascot head and found that it was stuck. As the new mascot arrived to pick up the costume, Bill struggled with the oversized feline head, a physical reminder of the chaotic but well-intentioned week they had all endured. Despite the misunderstandings and the labels, the family remained united, ready to face whatever the next school year might bring.